Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ, and welcome to our page through review revisit of Vampire the Dark Ages. Yes, on this channel, we are traveling around the world, discovering and rediscovering tabletop role playing games that are. I've been using the word enculturated. I don't know if it's a real word, but I'm using it in this context, taking place that are built around a fantasy uh, history, culture, location that embodies uh, the mythology of the region. And so right now we're in Central Europe. We've moved from the Americas across the ocean and across the frozen land island or whatever, and now we're here in Dark Ages. But we will be doing this for about an hour-ish, so grab your snacks, sit back, relax, and join us as we take yet another deep look at an oldie but goodie, Vampire the Dark Ages from White Wolf Gaming. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining here. Hey, Spook. Yeah. None of you. It's not a lack of culture. I'm. I am specifying that we're just having fun here. By the time. By the way, but there's something I want to do a little preamble before we get deep into this book, and that is that I'm discovering with our look. We went to Aztec, Mayans, Incans. We went to the indigenous peoples of the United States in a First Nations artificial look into the future. I mean, we looked at a Viking style game, and so on and so forth, right? And we'll be traveling around the world. And something I didn't think about, but I'm discovering is that these games are a great stopgap for something known as spectacle creep. So spectacle creep, and this is more for movies and television, but you'll understand about this for tabletop role-playing games. Spectacle creep is, in order to make the next iteration better, we just make it bigger. Okay, so a very simple thing that creators will do is, and this happens in video games, this happens in graphic novels, books, television, is our heroes go up against one big thing that's dangerous. And then in order to make the next iteration of that thing better, they just make it bigger. So an example would be maybe our heroes stop a bomb from exploding a building. Okay, well, the next time they just make a bigger bomb that wants to take out a whole city. And then the next time it takes out a whole country. And then the whole world is about to end. And then it's 5 worlds. Oh, no, it's the entire galaxy. No, it's the entire universe. No, it's all multiverses. And it goes on and on and on. And unfortunately, let me turn off this. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is that the stakes never seem to matter because there's always something bigger and better out there. And it's very difficult to run back. Very commonly amongst our fantasy D20 games, that is exactly what happens. It's spectacle creep. Okay, our heroes now went from +2s to +12s. So what do they fight? Instead of fighting other monsters that are +2s, they fight other monsters that are +12s. And it's just an equalization. Well, we have to balance everything, so the more powerful the heroes get, the more powerful the villains get. If it's not one dragon, it's 5 dragons. If it's not one undead vampire, it's a dozen undead vampires, and that can get old. But with these encultured games, a lot of the motivation tends to be internalized, and both internalized with the character's motivations, like what is the purpose of them being in this culture and what is important within the culture. And that really tends to put a cap on the external bigger, better, badder, more dangerous thing. Also, what ends up happening is internally within the culture of this world, whatever time period it is, or fantasy or whatever, there are important things happening in that world that are more survival and day in the life of, even if it's arcane or mystical or high tech or whatever, that is also very important. Not necessarily survival, although there's a lot of these games that have a lot of survival techniques in them and tactics, and it's part of the game, a little bit of resource management, but also that when you have a game where you have things like honor or face or reputations or community and whatnot, it always leaves space for threats. So let's say players have to take care of a community. Well, there's disease and there's bad weather and there's the aftermath of different war or banditry or something. And that never seems to go away, even if the players become bigger and badder badasses. The day in the life remains the same. I hope I made some sense with that. But anyway, let's get into this page through. Sorry, did some little preamble. So this is Vampire: The Dark Ages, the first edition, created by White Wolf Games. If you are familiar in any way with Vampire: The Masquerade, which was, again, a D10 dice pool system way back in the 90s, early 90s, this came about during their method of taking the game and turning it into a make it more historical. So in the beginning, there was like vampire, werewolf, mummy, wraith, changeling, mage, and all of these games took place in the modern age. And then they decided, hey, wait a minute, we could make this. You know what? I need to make this a 2-pager. We can make this game a bit more interesting if we do it historically. And Vampire: The Dark Ages, at its time, while White Wolf was going through some financial issues, was very popular and was quite a success. And we will explain why as we page through this. So, of course, these are all of the credits to the game, the layout and whatnot. They always had some kind of introductory fluff, a storyline or something to get you immersed into it. Content, and always had lots of border work that they've done on these books from way back in the day. Even a watermark is often seen in the books. Kind of cool, get you immersed in it, whatnot. So you as players take on the roles of vampires in 12th century Europe. Now, mind you, this isn't, again, like a lot of these history-based tabletop role-playing games. Let's get past this introduction. This introduction is like a note to the player characters about who they are and what their nature is. Basically, one vampire to another, an older vampire to what your life is going to be like. Now, one of the cool things about this game that really brought this into the attention of, that's a weird. There we go. Okay. Okay. One of the things that really brought this into the attention of people who normally didn't play Dungeons and Dragons is, as the thumbnail says, it's not D&D, is the fact that as a beginning player, you're a bit of a badass. You really are. And that really, that was one of the things that made this different than many other role-playing games when you at its time back in the late 90s. And as a vampire, yeah, against one, maybe a handful of mortals, you're gonna beat ass. But because you are the thing that goes bump in the night, because you are the dangerous thing that's in the shadows, there are other things in the shadows with you that are just as dangerous. Now, playing in the Dark Ages, what became very cool about playing a vampire in the Dark Ages is that there were a lot of different enemies. I'll say adversaries that come at you. Yeah, don't at me, bro. But yeah, they will come at you, win or lose, because of who you are. So there are other vampires that are older and more ancient than you. There are wizards and the Inquisition and faith, religion, and faith is very, very big here. Also, the fact that um, at this period of time, people believed in evil. They believed in ghosts and vampires and things that go bump in the night, and prepared themselves for the onslaught of evils and such. So while in the modern context, you could kind of walk around um, during the dark nights, and people didn't really believe in vampires, nor did they have a religious affiliation. In here, it's nothing for the people to pick up the pitchforks and go searching for where your haven is to turn you in, because hey, you heck, they burned people at the stake and they weren't undead. So, if you kind of slept during the day and walked around at night and couldn't be seen in shadows and whatnot, in your own reflection and whatnot, yeah, they were going to come at you. But also, vampire really embraced the idea of like the danger of getting in physical confrontations. It wasn't, while you could burn your blood, there's actually a mechanic where you have a blood pool, and this is a D10 dice pool system. You could build up your dice pool and make it huge, but there's a mechanic. Okay, no, I'm not going to go there. You can burn the blood that you've drunk to make yourself powerful, but you burn bright, but you burn out quick. And if you are surrounded or there are other enemies that can come after you, it can be very, very difficult. So this talks about surviving in the dark medieval world, private world's overpopulation, descent into madness, social distinctions, what your generation is. So in this game, the fictionalized Cain begat all the other vampires. And so the closer your generation is to Cain, second, third, fourth generation, the more powerful you are. Most player characters begin around 8th, 9th generation, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th generation. 13th generation making your blood thinner than, say, an 8th generation vampire. And there are mechanics that deal with that. And also it allows you to, this is weird to say, it allows you to drink more blood that you have inside of you, basically your blood points, and then you can burn those for dice for your character. This talks about the prince. The prince is just a generalized title of prince. Now, back in this period of time, very much, you're going to be very patriarchal, but being a vampire and being a badass vampire, there could be a lot of ladies and other people that are going to be in power behind the scenes in this dark world. Fealty and what the prince's powers are, and then I will stop here for the vampiric traditions and how they are handled quite a bit more loosely back in this time period, 12th century, than modern days. But still, there were traditions that were upheld because, there were there were a lot of humans that could hunt you down, kill you, especially when you're asleep during the day. I don't believe there was a vampire Bronze Age. Yeah, and remember, this game was designed like it's a dark reflection of our world. So it's not our world and then vampires in it. it's a dark reflection of our world. So while many of the historical things happened in the world of darkness, much of that was influenced by vampires, werewolves, ghosts, mages, mummies, and things like that. Now, the same events happened, but who was there? Like, there are even famous individuals that were known as being mages or vampires, or were slain by vampires or mind controlled and whatnot. So it's not an exact duplicate, but it's like, that person, that historical individual did that thing. I bet they were controlled by a vampire, weren't they? Like, for example, when Vampire the Masquerade first came out, they had a book called Chicago by Night, and they actually had Helen of Troy, and Helen of Troy was a vampire that controlled a very beautiful Paris, and Paris was working as a male model in Chicago. So yeah, there are things like that, and like I said, it was a dark turn, right? So they made Helen of Troy Helen, and Helena was a very powerful, very very powerful vampire, which, their example of Helen of Troy leaving where she was, it's like, oh, she was the most beautiful and they fell in love. No, she controlled his ass, and he couldn't get out of doing anything that she wanted. So here we get into a bit more deep parts of the lore. Prometheans, the Order of the Bitter Ashes, the Octaurus, the Incanu, the different orders, different factions. Are there hidden libraries about the dark world of vampires and werewolves and things like that? Are there people who will hunt them down? Are there religious institutions? What do those religious institutions know? What do they believe? Are they infiltrated by vampiric powers? Elysium's a very important thing in Vampire. These are like the neutral ground amongst the undead, where they decide on the rules and how they can adjudicate their behaviors and whatnot, and also set like a blood hunt. If you unprovoked murder kill another vampire, the other clans can get together and blood hunt you. Lex Talionis, the ordeal. This is also, like I mentioned before, about a blend of peasantry and the common folk, the faith and the orders of religious institutions, pure faith amongst commoners, which just because it's a church doesn't mean it is reflective of pure faith. But just because you're a commoner and of low blood and not a noble doesn't mean that you have a true faith inside of you. And all of these things combined together, whether it's the machinations of the nobility, whether it's hedge wizards trying to find out old hags living in the woods, ghosts and things like that, that complicate the lives of the player characters, all this combines together. And here's nobility, peasants, death and taxes, women in dark ages, merchants and craftsmen, clergy, the hierarchy of blood, plagues. Vampires are not normally affected by disease, but they sure as hell can spread those same diseases. So you got to watch out for that. And there was a lot of that. Here we talk about women in the Dark Ages. Princes, kings, and warriors. There are the archetypes that come to mind when we think of Middle Ages, but what about the other half of the population? What role do women play in the dark medieval world? Women in the Middle Ages were a bundle of contradictions, with sinful Eve and saintly Mary representing the two aspects of their sex. While women were not allowed to possess property in most circumstances, they were also looked on with great respect as the focus of chivalry. Few women owned shops in their own right, but they worked alongside their fathers, husbands, and sons at trades and crafts for the good of the family. Even fewer women than men were literate, but their roles in raising families were considered important nonetheless. I'm going to butcher these names. Eleanor of Aquitaine, Marie de France or Francais, Christine de Pizan, Hildegarde von Bingen, and many other medieval women whose names time have forgotten were able to rise to positions of power. They were the exceptions and not the rule, but the fact that they achieved a large degree of personal power demonstrates that it was not impossible, even in a historical medieval world, for women to rise in positions of prominence. And of course, there's the one that comes to mind is the woman that was burned at the stake. What's her name? Boy, why now I just forgot her name. Joan of Arc, woof, and other things like that. Yeah, so there's always the exceptions, so players can always be those exceptions. There's medieval beliefs about vampires and dark powers in general, law and order, personal security, and then hunters and hunted, and who hunts who and what are their beliefs. Many times vampires were thought of as a demon spawn, so there's people didn't separate them into different categories. As a matter of fact, a lot of these vampire hunters didn't even know that vampires had different clans, of which as a player you represent those different clans. And of course we get into clans and clan types in general. And vampires have often been referred to as, think of it like crime families. I often describe it as, think of it as high school, where you have different cliques, and vampire clans not only give you your vampiric powers, and there are different types of vampiric powers known as disciplines, and you can mix in, there are ways to mix and match the vampiric disciplines. It's not exactly concrete, but the clans, you belong to a clan, and your value to the clan or your responsibility to the clan is also another point of conflict. So yes, you can play a character that doesn't want to be part of your own clan, but the clan is looking at you like, just because you don't believe in us doesn't mean we don't believe in you. So that is yet another point of conflict. Lastly, each clan describes their clan weakness. So all of the vampiric limitations, weaknesses like running water or sleeping in a coffin or can't be seen in garlic, religious symbols, can't be seen in mirrors, things like that. Those each clan has their own weakness. And in general, the clans kind of come from specific regions around the world. The Assamite themselves kind of relate themselves to a central Persian, Iran, Iraq, Syria area, kind of, and the other vampires as well, in the regions and such. The Bruja are like, although they consistently deny it, the Bruja are far and away the clan most susceptible to frenzy. Most take no pride in this flaw of their blood, and many become hostile to the point of frenzy if the subject is raised. I don't get upset, F you! The difficulty for Bruja's frenzy roll is always too higher than the listed number. So, and then it goes on with the various clans. I'm going to get to your comments in just a minute. No matter how much blood they drink, they still look undead. Followers of Set, their weaknesses are very susceptible to sunlight. And of course, you can see, the iconography and the imagery and stuff seems to be around Egypt, Sudan. The Gangrel are closer to animalistic, and the more they lose control and go into a frenzy, the more animalistic they become and take on those attributes like fur and fangs and things of that nature. Sometimes mistaken for, and sometimes even have relationships with the werewolves out there. They're very nomadic. La Sombra are the shadow. Shadow vampires, they cannot be seen in mirrors, and they kind of manipulate shadows. The Malkavians are suffer from a permanent madness, derangement they call it in this game. Nosferatu are the ugly ones. They are permanently disfigured, often cast aside, and they often have to live in the sewers and the dark alleys and whatnot. The rooftops and whatnot. They're never part of society. Have to cover themselves. Maybe living as homeless. Of the Ravnos, this clan has undergone a bit of a change because it was based on real people, and but since then these are the the illusionist, the tricksters. They are also very nomadic, and much of their weakness is that they have a flavor of deception, like lying, thieving, gambling, cheating, and so it's placed with that. I think in modern parlance they've kind of changed it quite a bit. The Toreador are the artists, the artistes, and they have a uncontrollable desire for and a sensitivity to beauty that can entrance them, and that beauty could be people, places, and or things. The Tremere are a vampiric clan that came about because of magic. Basically, they became vampiric because of wizardry that felt that they could harness the blood of vampires to make themselves immortal and gain that power. So these vampires, uh, they purposefully drank the blood of vampires to become immortal, and they are in this period of time, because of drinking the blood, they are seen as evil warlocks and can be detected as such. And because they drink the blood of their elders, drinking the blood of another vampire bonds you to that vampire. And I believe if you do it 3 times on 3 different days, not 9 times, it's if you do it 3 times, each day being different, then you become more blood bound to them, and you cannot harm them, and they can ask of you things, and you cannot refuse it. The pronunciation of these, like I call them the Bruja or the Bruja. This word, we used to call them in our games Zemis or the Zemise. When I wanted to be when I wanted to be both noble and arrogant, I would pronounce it Zemise. But the Zemis, whatever. You tell me if I'm putting the improper emphasis on the incorrect syllable. But they must live in and are tied to their land, so they must. They're often seen living in their coffins, but actually, what happens is their coffin is lined with the very dirt from their land, so it's very difficult for them to leave their homes. And when they do, they bring along lots of dirt. The Ventru are vampires that only feed on the blood of a specific type of blood from specific types of people. Described as all Ventru have a specific limitation on their feeding habits. They may only drink the vital, the vitae of one particular type of prey, like priests, non-Christians, virgins, Englishmen, etc., chosen at the time of character creation. Ventru will not feed in a method that violates their prey exclusion, even if starving, wounded, or deranged. So those are the clans. And then here are the way of the clans, like what their purposes are, what their goals are, and if basically conflict points if the players are involved in it, if at all. And the players could be tasked with engaging in the practices of the clan, and then it could come into conflict with the other party members. Normally, various vampiric characters brought together are called a coterie or coterie, and sometimes you could put in like a coven or a circle, but a coterie is a number of different vampires linked together, and you could be together for survival, maybe for political reasons, temporarily because the leadership is gone. And let's get to your comments because I'm paging ahead too much. Drew says, I usually pronounce the Zemisay with a harder K sound towards the M. Zemisk? Okay. I'm not gonna. I am not someone to correct anyone. But yeah, when you see these words, sometimes you're like, wait a minute. I don't mind reading it, but what is it? What the hell does it sound like when you say it out loud? You know. Zamasay is how my group always said it. I don't think anyone knows how to actually say it though. I'm with you there, Spook. Like, wait, which emphasis is it? Is it the first one, like Zemasay or Zemisay or Zemasis, Zemake, shit? As I always pronounce Bruja in a Spanish manner, the Bruja with the J as a H sound, which is how I always pronounced it. And also, in many ways, you could also do it through generations. Like people in the ye olden days pronounced it this way, but you're younger and you pronounce it in another way. That's how we would do it when we played Vampire in the modern age. That in the modern age, we pronounced it, I would say, the street level, right? Modern age, young folk, meaning like 50, 100 years or younger. We pronounced it in the lazy American tongue, but the people from the old world pronounced it in a more refined manner. Drew says, it feels so weird to look back at Masquerade and Dark Ages. I played those so much back in the day. Me too. And these days I find pretty much everything wrong about them. You definitely get to play. You definitely get to play in an age where, and in a game style that's just like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't be doing these things. Because we see seasonally in a tabletop role-playing game where people say, hey, we want to play an evil campaign, and people make videos about playing evil campaigns. Cyberpunk comes to mind. A more modern game would be Blades in the Dark, as playing like an evil campaign. But we often don't realize, like, playing werewolf and vampire and mage, like, you do some pretty horrible things in these games and represent the horrors of those. Yeah, and debate is how we spend the rest of the hour. Exactly. So what is it about this game that we should take from it? What I've loved about the World of Darkness, meaning like for the gaming industry itself, is that it has a built-in setting with nothing but conflict. I've often said on the channel, although I haven't done this in a recent video, is that if the players don't move, the world should move the players. Meaning, like, many times players will want to turtle themselves up. They don't want to get involved. They're like, I want to protect my character. I don't want to go on adventures. I spent 3 hours making my player character. Why would I want to threaten them? And the World of Darkness is always threatening the players. Making no choice is a choice in this world. And so there is a lot of, if you're not for me, you're against me. If you're not with us, if you are not my friend, you are my enemy. And it is also we talk about, or we've heard the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, in this, it's the opposite. Like the friend of my enemy is definitely my enemy. So it's very difficult in this game setting, and especially in this ancient medieval, dark medieval fantasy realm. Like you make an ally one place, you're going to make an enemy with someone else. Something else I like about this game is the White Wolf has created. There's a couple more things, but White Wolf has created competing stats, and that means, like, the greater one of your statistic goes up, the less viable it is if another stat with using other stats. So, and we'll get to a character sheet in just a moment. The Dark Wolf. The White Wolf games have always had a simplified, dare I say, scannable. Does anybody remember going to places to make photocopies of gaming stuff? Well, they've always often had these 2-page spreads about character creation. Basically, you know, how many steps you take, how many points you put in things, many of your archetypes for your like nature and demeanor, a bunch of example concepts, your clans, your backgrounds, your disciplines and the powers they are, freebie points when you spend your freebie points to kind of round out your character at the very end after picking your first you pick your concrete stuff, and then you pick freebie points to kind of round out who you are so you can be a little bit different than everyone else, and then even experience point costs. But we often like these kind of things. Now we got PDFs so you can kind of share that around to people. But I like competing stats. Like if your humanity goes up, that means that it can very easily drop when you do evil things. If your humanity's low, you can get away with doing very heinous things to mortal society. But it means that, you know, when you sleep during the day, you're not as active because you're more bestial. It also means that you go into a frenzy far more easily than if you're far more human and whatnot. It's a whole big thing. And the alignment system, if it's not really an alignment system, the nature and demeanor system is really great as well. Sorry, I'm going to go back up here. To the very left, let's see if we can make this. I wish it didn't change the size. So, during the character creation, you basically have a dice pool, little dots that you fill in on a character sheet, and during this process, you know, you choose your concept, your clan, your nature, your demeanor, your road. Road is a bit like your alignment. It's like the undead, the vampires. In order to survive, you must understand what path you're taking because you are cursed with vampiric immortality. And so, whether you think you're a beast or you're trying to find a way to solve being corrupted by the beast and other things like that. So, and then there's different categories. This uses a 9 brick. It's 3 stats across and 3 stats down, divided as physical, social, and mental. And then there's 3 stats associated with each of the physical, social, and mental statistics. So you've got your physical stats, your social stats, and your mental stats. And all of those can be used and or threatened. And then you have talents, skills, and knowledges. Talents everyone has and can use them even if you don't have points in them. Skills most people have, and knowledges you can only use them if you have dots in them. And again, you know, they even tell you like, hey, no ability can be higher than 3 at this stage, and then you keep on the character during your character creation process. You get 4 points in your disciplines. Those are your vampiric powers, like hypnotism or extreme toughness, speed, hiding in shadows, turning into mist, growing, you know, huge fangs, crawling on walls, things like that. Backgrounds are bread and butter vampires. Backgrounds are things like allies or ghouls or magical traits and things of that nature. More social, backgrounds are more social. And then your virtues, whether you have like courage, self-control, your consciousness, things like that. And then you get freebie points to round out everything else. And then nature and demeanor. Your nature is what you are internally. You can't change that. Or very rarely does it change. It's who you are. Your demeanor, on the other hand, is what you present to the outside world. You could be very much a liar, and your demeanor could be very practiced in, say, very high social standard, but maybe you become exiled and now your demeanor changes because you have to adapt to a new world. And yes, you can very much mix and match your nature and demeanor, and two player characters can have the exact same the two words that represent nature and demeanor, but you flip them and they become very different. So yes, you could be both a caretaker and a barbarian. And depending on how your character is portrayed, you flip them. Mechanically, there is something known as willpower, and you are not forced to portray your nature or demeanor at all, but you regain willpower when you play into your nature and demeanor. So it is more carrot than stick, and I like that. So if you play into your nature, you and let's go back to here. If you play into your nature, you gain a benefit for that, and it encourages the role playing of it. So there's a lot of little knobs and dials in the game to get you to role play. And White Wolf basically single-handedly brought in like the goths, the emos, people who normally didn't role play, and here we go. So, oh yeah. Sorry, 2-pager. That's a character sheet. That's the full page of the character sheet. We'll get it right big here if you've never seen one before. All the character sheets are they're basically identical across the White Wolf gaming products. The only thing different would be like the fonts, and if it's modern day, if it's ancient, you'll see like some of the skills and knowledges and things like that changed around. But it's a character sheet. You basically your attributes are not attached to your abilities below. So under attributes, you've got 9 attributes, and then you've got all these abilities below. And when performing an action, you basically are tasked with picking an attribute and an ability. And because they're not attached, you could roll strength plus animal kin. You could roll perception plus intimidation. You could roll dexterity plus melee. You might roll appearance plus stealth, and any combination thereof. And if you can come up with some really cool combinations to do the exact same, to solve the same problem, it's cool. So an example would be, I want to blend into a crowd, so I'm going to hide in a crowd. Is that charisma plus stealth, or is it dexterity plus, what's another one down here? Like, let's see, stealth. What's another way to hide? Athletics, brawl, subterfuge. Is it any of those things? Appearance plus stealth, and you're like, yeah, any of those could be those things. And as a dice pool, like most dice pools, you don't add up all the dice. So you roll your bucket of D10s, and then you beat a difficulty number, which is kind of a limitation in this. I will explain it in a little bit. Here are the disciplines. There's not many details in it. It's basically you have a name of your discipline, and each dot that goes up, you get the thing that's below it. So if you have a dot, 1, 2, or 3 dots, you have the first level of it. Then you get the first and second level, and if you have 3 dots, you have the first, second, and third level of those abilities. And most beginning player characters don't go much higher than 3 dots in nearly anything, unless you put your freebie points in it. And then here are the virtues: consciousness or conviction, self-control or instinct. You mark out the one that doesn't apply to your character. And then there's courage. And then here's the road of heaven for this character. Here's the willpower, and there's the blood pool. And your willpower, basically you burn willpower for automatic successes. Sometimes you need more than one success to fully complete to do a thing. And then you have your road, and your road, the higher your road is, the more difficult it is to get up there, but the more human you are. Let's see what your comments are. Can't see them. There we go. All right. The built-in conflicts in this game, if you want to emulate a historical game, you absolutely positively can do a thing like Do you want your players to be part of the Crusades? Do you want them to be part of like some kind of religious reformation? Maybe the players are trying to get rid of a rival clan, group, coven, whatever, because there are people that are gathering together to get rid of the evil. Maybe the players are down with making amends and atoning for the sins that they have for being a player character, right? Hey, we're feeding on the blood of innocence, or maybe not so innocent. How do we atone for that? And how do they represent themselves? And yes, there are vampires that are part of the church. Now, then that comes to point, like, if you're allowed to be a vampire in a religious institution, how noble is that religious institution? I wonder. Here is one of the choices for nature and demeanor. This just happens to be one known as the rogue, and it gives a little description of kind of like how to play it, and then at the very end of each of these choices, it tells you how to regain willpower. So under rogue, it says, "You are all that matters. Every man must fend for himself, and if your actions get in others' way, well, too bad. If they were stronger, perhaps they could enjoy their unlives as well as you do. Not that you're a bully, mind you, just self-centered and aggressively selfish. You need not be a dominator. You'll just be damned if you're the dominated. Rogues pride themselves on self-sufficiency. You may be a thief, an errant knight, a vagabond, or a prostitute. In any case, others look down upon you for refusing to live by their rules. And in the end, however, you keep your own best interests at heart. Never let another lead you." And lastly, it says, "Regain willpower whenever your selfishness leads to some kind of gain, especially if you can earn it without exposing yourself to risk or following another's orders." And so, and that applies to many of the others. Regain willpower if you blah, blah, blah. And then these are the roads of blood, roads of chivalry, roads of the devil, roads of humanity. Basically, it's like a code that you live by. It doesn't necessarily need to be a code that everyone else knows. It's your personal code. And then we get into the rules, what your perception is, what your strength is, and how many dots, and how that relates to the rest of the world. I believe two is average. And then when it comes to skills, basically 1 dot means you can do it, and then you go up from there. You become like competent, master level, things like that. And then there are specialties in some of those. So you might have like athletics, but you might be very good at climbing, where someone else may be good at doing backflips or balancing or jumping or leaping or swimming or something like that. And then we get into more details about, this is all the gamified stuff. Backgrounds and what kind of backgrounds you can pick. And while the dots don't seem very like, that's okay, the thing that will round out your character are things like your allies, your contacts, the generation, when you spend your background on your generation, are herd. So you might want a herd that you can feed from freely. A herd is like a group of people, and spending from 1 to 5 dots, you can have from 3 vassals to 60. Like, you built up a group of mortals from whom you can feed without fear. This herd also helps protect you and can be used to perform a number of different services. However, the herd is not as tightly controlled or as loyal as retainers, and is not as closely connected to you as allies. So, and there's different things. Maybe you might have influence in the world, a mentor, powerful mentor, or knowledgeable mentor, resources like wealth, things like that, retainers. And then you have your virtues, your self-control, your courage, and the things that will set you off. Your road and your virtues dictate before you go into a frenzy. Essentially, every vampire is a blood addict, and to resist fear of like religious faith and religion, fire, sunlight, it's able to do that. And then we get into disciplines, the powers of the vampires. Let me find a really cool discipline. Let's go to this first one. Animalism. Animalism is a discipline associated with, well, animals. And we've seen this before, right? Where bats, wolves, rats, things like that. And animalism allows you to summon those animals and control them. In our games, we used to open it up a lot. So it could be snakes, it could be like, owls or ravens and things. We open it up a lot just to make it different. What's another one that's a common one? Upper left here, celerity is basically speed. It's vampiric speed, where it looks like teleportation to mortals, but basically you're moving very quickly from one place to another. I'm trying to remember which one comes first. Madness, dominates, very, very cool. The mental domination is different. Dominate is different than presence. So presence, it's more like, I just happen to be alluring to people and charming, where dominate is like, I'm gonna look you in the eye and hypnotize you and make you do what I want. Obfuscate. Obfuscate is the hide in shadows or hide in plain sight ability. Excuse me. And then obtenebration is the ability to control shadows. And yes, you can during character creation, you can mix and match many of these with your freebie points, but your clan gives you the three disciplines that associate with your clan. And then with freebie points, you can pick others. And of course, conversation with your game master, you're what they call a storyteller. You get to pick those. So let's go towards the game master section. The Crusader. And these are systems, basically. How do you adjudicate everything from combat to healing to just rolling the dice and what they mean? There's a little bit of confrontation about the idea of rolling. So there are two methods, two dials to all difficulties, and while interesting, a little hard to explain and use at the table. So one way of difficulty is gaining more successes. So it's a dice pool game. So you need a number of successes from 1 to 5. And 1 usually is you barely did it, and 5 means you did it completely, if not a critical success. If you roll 10s on your D10s, every time you roll a 10, you get to roll again. They're exploding dice. You get to roll again and again every time you roll a 10. And if you roll 1s take away your successes, 1 for 1. So if you roll a 1 and you beat the difficulty, both of those cancel each other out. And they keep canceling each other out until you're left with no successes and rolling a 1, in which case that is called a botch. Now, that is a problem with dice pool systems, because you shouldn't be able to fail with more dice. And so that happens with a dice pool system. But it does limit it, meaning like, yes, the more successes you have cancel out the 1s. But the other issue is the difficulty number. So in here, they have examples of like, oh, you want to sneak past the guard, you have to beat a difficulty of 7, like 6, 7, 8, 9. And so it was a little hard to adjudicate this game on the fly, because you could make the argument, hey, you need more successes, or the difficulty number is high. And in the second generation and generations thereafter of White Wolf, they kind of stabilize that a little bit, and like, no, let's keep one static and move the other one around, because if you keep moving both, it can get a little bit more difficult. When we played, we very rarely moved the difficulty up and down. We just had more successes. So you want to sneak past the guard, you get 1 success. You get past the guard, but the guard is alerted to something. Whereas the difficulty usually didn't move up and down unless there was, like, it wasn't something that the player did. It was more like the circumstances were different. We're getting into like fire, sunlight, going into torpor. Torpor is like the how the undead sleep. It's, you basically go into like a suspended animation kind of thing. Being a vampire is not easy. Role-playing derangements, blood oaths, all that, all the good stuff, dramatic systems. Now, the other complication of playing a vampire during this era, or playing a vampire in general, is you basically have to sleep during the day. And how do you do that when you're surrounded by your enemies? So it's always a complication, especially when players are traveling, where to go to sleep, where to hunt, who's going to find out. This is a medieval realm where most people knew their neighbors, even if by association, if not by name. So when people start disappearing or acting funny, it can alert civilization and societies to start preparing themselves and changing their behaviors, which can complicate the lives of the vampires, even if they don't believe the vampires are around, as well as the fact that players tend to be the movers and shakers of this dark world, and there can be unintended consequences, what sometimes are known as first, second, third order side effects. And it means that, you know, if you feed upon a noble and then that noble then can't make a decision about something because they are weakened, maybe another mortal might take advantage of that and, you know, kill them in their sleep or oust them from a council or whatever. What I'm showing here is a page through of an event, and then it's talking about, like, here's what power they used, here's how the storyteller adjudicated it and whatnot. And because characters have physical, social, and mental stats, you can also threaten players along those lines. Everything doesn't have to be physical. It's actually not a good idea to get in physical combat because it's so dangerous, because it's like it's an escalation of power, and vampires tend to go very fast and become very brutal, especially when the blood goes flying. Because, you know, once blood starts getting spilt and you smell blood, you might not even be able to pull yourself out of a combat when you need to run for it, and or you might be trying to intimidate your enemy and spill blood, and then you may kill them by accident. Or same thing when it comes to feeding. You may want to just drain a little bit of blood. You're not trying to hurt them, and you want to hypnotize them so they don't even remember what happened. But instead, you leave a dead body in an alley, and you're like, yeah, it's the third time I did that. Now, this is the storytelling part of it, the storyteller, and deciding what kind of chronicle you'll have. And this gives the examples and ideas about, like, why are the players together? How are they together? How are you going to adjudicate this? And how to tell stories. And this gives you some ideas about running a chronicle. Brainstorm, get input, set boundaries. What kind of setting is it? Are players going to be nobles? When does it take place? And mind you, this is a very cinematic game, so, and a dark world, so it have to coincide with real histories, but you could play into those histories, like, hey, we are going to be in Italy or Germany, or sail the Mediterranean, or, you know, be Spaniards or something like that, and you can rely on that. Knights of the Round Table, Dark Knights of the Round Table. These are different styles, adjusting your styles, different techniques for creating, like, tips and tricks for doing things, varying tones, using analogies, themes. Themes, for me, this is my fallback, whether it's good or not. Picking themes, like whether you want to have survival stories. Let's make this a one-pager, and then So these are different types of stories. Now, of course, you can mix and match these as you wish, but you can also stick to one thing if that's what your players wish. So there's like espionage, power, identity, who are we, survival, story concepts like go on, such as outcasts. Are the players outcasts? We once did a Egyptian themed one where one player was immortal and everybody else played another arcane background in the world of darkness, and it was a regain the throne game. It was supposed to be a one shot, but it was like 6 or 7 sessions and roaming around in the desert. Outcasts, paladins, dust to dust, hell's pawns, a profitable slander, being accused of things, rescued dead or alive, caught between the devil, the blood of life. And these are just examples. Like this one here, caught between the devil. Two factions of hedge wizards drag the characters into their ongoing feud. The fighting began when a group of sorcerers in the city stole an ancient tome detailing dozens of spells and rituals. These sorcerers are merchants and artisans led by a wayward exorcist who want to use magic to gain wealth. The book originally belonged to a group of diabolists who met in the forest nearby, typically nasty sorts who want the book to gain power, compel women to bed them, slay those who annoy them, etc. It is important that the characters can't make heads or tails of the book. They are supposed to be in a quandary as to whom they support, not just gunning to steal the book for themselves. Although I would allow that to happen because, players, right? Seeking allies to help them recover the book. The Diabolist conjure a demon who tells them of the characters. The Diabolist then approach the characters to offer them magical favors in return for the book. If they refuse, the Diabolist summon another demon, etc., etc. And then it just gets complicated after that. Normally what ends up happening is you could create a very simple story and then the players will end up creating such secondary and third order conflict that it'll kind of tell its own story. For the love of Christ. Yeah, that part of this game is the we need to have a talk at session 0 about how deep do we want to go into religion. What does evil mean? Is this Dante's Inferno? How are we fading to black when it comes to certain actions, and how descriptive and or deep are we going to get into some of the dark medieval elements of dysentery, sacrifice, torture, that kind of thing. Get to your comments and then let you guys go. So, Vampire: The Dark Ages, there are many supplements to this. There's one called Veil of Night, which is vampire in the Middle East, which takes place around Israel, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, that region, Turkey, and talks about vampirism in that realm. I don't even know if that book, The Veil of Night, could even be produced today because there would be so much of an uproar at the time. Pretty interesting and dark and deep. And I think Vampire: The Dark Ages, remember I'm talking about enculturation, is pretty cool because you get to play with a lot of different cultures. Those of us like myself, armchair historians living over here in the States, that basically I know negative information about ancient Europe, but I do know a lot when it comes to the cinematic, part of it. And if you want to play it that way or emphasize much of the language and culture in your own region, if you are in the Euro theater, this Vampire: The Dark Ages really allows you to do that. Also, you can kind of play this like Dungeons and Dragons a little bit. I mean, Can you actually go down into a real dungeon or an abandoned castle and have an adventure with fighting off spirits, demons, other vampires that have become monstrous and bestial? Yes, you can absolutely do that. Now, mind you, the context would be very different. If it's an abandoned castle, more likely than not, it was sieged at some point. So maybe the players have a limited amount of time before bandits take it over, or another duke, duchess, viscount, whatever, baron or whatever takes it over and acquires it, or homeless, peasantry take it over and want to start living in it, that kind of thing. There's lots of things that go bump in the night that where the players may want to be the paladins, the defenders of the innocent, and that puts the players in a precarious position. Like players who cannot receive the gifts of faith but are defending the faithful. So unfortunately, players and true faith, and this is a real game thing, capital T, F, capital F, true faith is a real power in this game, and it is very undefined. True faith basically allows someone with true faith to basically, miracles are presented before them. Their faith protects them against evil, and players are basically evil because you're a vampire. So you're coded as evil, no matter how nice you or kind you want to be, and you're fighting against your evil nature. So players could be defenders in the night, knowing that they could never go back to or associate themselves with the faithful, and also fighting against the daylight. Right? Players going to have to play, and they're going to try to figure out ways to defend themselves. So where do they sleep? Do they, when the parents are telling their children to stay away from the abandoned keep on the hill, how much are the kids going to listen to that? Maybe the adults are like, hell no, I ain't going up there. But the kids might find out that there are vampires or at least the undead that live in these regions. And so constantly having to figure out how to defend themselves, how to move forward, what evil things are out there. The dichotomy between the players being badasses and being the pawns, the victims, the lower caste in a very powerful, the powerful machinations of the Methuselahs and the ancient vampires that are around them, and then mixing and matching other things like let's say mixing and matching ghosts and demons and other things. And they suggest, if you don't own the werewolf books, if you don't own the wraith or changeling books, basically just take the stuff that's already in the book and reflavor it, change it, flavor it, manipulate it to fit your own sessions. And everything doesn't have to be an enemy up front, but they could be enemies before. This vampire tends to flow very, very easily and into a dark noir type of storytelling. So players may need to hunt down and slay innocent people. There may not be forgiveness for those who succumb to their own weaknesses. Players there might be some minimal player versus player when one player goes out of control and the other players have to pull them back some kind of way. So yeah, there's a lot of that, and I like it. I like the idea of players being responsible for a community, being responsible for their own actions, and players who like to throw hand grenades, monkey wrenches into things and leaving may, cause, heck, the players could even be responsible for the various crusades that happen because of all the dark things that they've left behind, and also trying to figure out how to stop or cover up the dark actions of others that are in the world. And then of course gaining power for themselves, whether it's arcane power, going towards Golconda. Golconda is like a not getting rid of their vampiric power, but reaching a level in which you are no longer a slave to your vampiric undead desires. And very rare to get to gold conduit. I've never played a game where players were able to do it, because most of the people I played with were pretty dark and dangerous individuals. So, and they loved it, you know. So anyway, thank you very much for letting me show off Vampire: The Dark Ages. There are plenty of books related to it. Unfortunately, what happened with Vampire, as many games start to explode, is they became a victim of their own success. So as different iterations of the game came about, they started siloing themselves. So if you were a vampire player, not many people that played Vampire also played Mage, and also played Werewolf, and also played Wraith or Mummy or Changeling. And so while they did sell books, and at the time there was a huge spike of books about, one book per vampire clan, one book per city, one book per region of the world. Like there's for Dark Ages, there's a storyteller's guide, there's a player's guide, there's Veil of Night that I mentioned, where the main Vampire: The Dark Ages book that I'm paging through now is essentially the Euro theater. Veil of Night is more the Middle East, and there's books about Iberia, books about Turkey and Libya, and you're just like, in Egypt, and there was a lot of books. But guess what? If you start playing Dark Ages, what you're not doing is spending money on modern Vampire: The Masquerade. You're not spending money on Mummy: The Resurrection. You're not spending money on Wraith the Oblivion, which people really didn't. Wraith the Oblivion is a brilliant White Wolf game, and nobody played it. These are all the antagonists here. Tribes of werewolves, what the vampires may or may not know, and the rumors about them. Kinfolk, spirit world, templates, drinking werewolf blood. Players are going to want to do that, become an abomination. There were rules for abominations too. A vampiric werewolf. Of course, players want to do that. Magi and magicians, and types of clerical miracle workers, folk magicians, high magi, witches, infernalists, familiars, philosopher scientists, alchemists, things like that, and just reworking the rules you already have. Magic with a K. So there's MAGIC, and then there's MAGICK, and ending with a K is a specific type of magic related to, like, Mage the Ascension. It talks about that, and then eventually I do have a Mage, the Dark Ages book. I can't remember if it was called Mage the Dark Ages, but it talks about Magi, some of their power. I like this artwork. Sorry, to the left, very, very stark black and white art. It reminds me of Runehammer. Brandish Gillum kind of reminds me of that. Very stark and descriptive. And then you have your more ink blot sketched out. Kind of reminds me of someone who's like carved into like a piece of wood, and then ink is rolled over it, and then you just stamp it. I don't know what that's called. Templates. Wraiths and ghosts. Wraithly history. They even pulled. I didn't even just noticed that they even pulled the Wraiths font and pulled it over here. So didn't realize that. Yeah, Wraiths and the undead, and Wraith the Oblivion, fairies, and the Fae out there in the wilds. Fae customs and practices, giving you a little bit to fill out the World of Darkness world, so that the players have something else to do other than just confronting other vampires. Drinking Fae blood. Oof. And then crossover rules. Unfortunately, what happened in the first generation of these games is that there were different groups that were taking the framework of the rules and then building their own thing out. Like when it comes to Wraith and Mummy and Changeling and Werewolf. And then it got so popular, they were like, hey, let's combine this together. And then you realize some of the creators were like, oops, I did something wrong. So sometimes in the back of the books, they had to like have a conversion sheet. Like, hey, you realize if you have 8 dots in this thing, it's like 5 dots in this other thing. So, yeah. And there's templates for like demons, succubi, warriors, and whatnot. Health levels, and we'll get to the end here, the appendix. Merits and flaws. Let's see, we get to. And these are merits and flaws you can buy for your character to either gain more freebie points or spend some of your freebie points on them. Some were merits, some were flaws. Just here with the awareness portion of this. Acute sense, color blindness, hard of hearing, bad sight, one eye, deaf. You could also gain some of these and lose some of these during gameplay. We did that as in place of like magic items, rewards and things. Sometimes you can gain those and lose those, as well as gaining experience points and whatnot. We in our games, we tended to stay away from the experience point part of it and just kind of like eyeballed it and was like, hey, why don't your character gain this thing? And we were just like, oh, how many points is that? Like, well, hey, your character now has, let me pick this, Iron Will. It's a 4-point merit. And everyone's like, I guess, hey, how about we just give each other like 5 points or something? And then everybody would just go, okay, I'll pick 5 points for this or 2 points for that. Or it makes sense that my character would lose this thing because he did this thing. And we were like, oh, man, well, all right, well, since now your character's got one eye, why don't you take an extra 2 points for this thing to take for this other thing? And then we were like, all right, yeah, cool. So a long list of merits and flaws. I guess if you had to relate it to Dungeons and Dragons, they're like feats. Although I guess you could say they're negative feats. Equipment lists, of course, and resource requirement. There are no gold piece. There's no gold piece expenditures. Resource just allows you to be able to purchase certain things. There's a die roll related to it if you'd like to, and then you would just lose part of your resources if you purchase some of these things. And if it's low enough and your resource, which is a background, you pick your resources. If it's high enough, you could just give it away. Again, we used to eyeball it. We weren't real strict about that kind of thing. And then we have ourselves, hey, character sheet. There we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, where are you? Oh, you're okay, TA. Kind of funny, a group of friends made their own vampire game because of this called House Nocturne, and it was way more hands-on melee, handled with foam-padded weapons. Oh, okay. yeah, I hear you. Yeah, live action. Onyx Path did a pretty good job of bringing them together on a balanced scale. Yes, the ownership of the White Wolf games is a little bit complicated. So Onyx Path has a back in 2012s to 2018s, they did I'm guessing at that they did 20th anniversary versions of the games and restructured the rules a little bit, evened them out, got rid of things that were contradictory, and smoothed out the gaming process. So some people, some grognards like myself were just like, I can't believe they changed the rule. Fold arms, pout bottom lip, hold breath. Right? There are some of those, but I think the 20th anniversary versions of the games, of which I have 2 of them, did a pretty good job organizing them and getting them into one page. I'm not really a fan of the aftermath of when White Wolf jiggered their entire game system and made like the Requiem and the other games. I'm not really a fan of those, and it's a bias. It's not because they aren't good. It's just like I own a bunch of first edition games and even a bunch of reprints from the first edition games. I understand why they did it. It just hurt my feelings. So I'm kind of butthurt about that. But anyway, yeah, here's a vampire character sheet. Very common look at it and whatnot. And once you became comfortable with the character sheets, it very easily blended over into the other games. The one complication in the game that bothered, I think, a number of people was the health. I can't highlight that, can I? Nope. Was the health system. So if you'll look down here, instead of like hit points, I guess you could call them hit points if you wanted to, you had health conditions like bruised, hurt, blah, blah, blah. There were ways to gain more bruised checkmark boxes with certain merits, but all characters had these same levels of physical injury. But what made some characters tougher than others was their stats. So if you're to defend yourself from an attack, you would roll dice, and the dice would basically be a soak roll, and it would soak up, being stabbed by a spear or being hit by a cudgel or something like that. Now, it meant that instead of like having a shield that stopped 2 points of damage, instead what would happen is you would roll your stamina. Sometimes there were vampiric disciplines that added to it. And how we operated it in our game or explained it was that you are actively, how do I explain? This is weird to say. You're actively ignoring the harm done to you. So a vampire could be stabbed through the chest with a spear, and you're like, uh-oh, I'm about to get stabbed by a spear. You make your soak roll. Yes, you got impaled by the spear, or maybe not impaled. Well, yeah, the spear goes through your chest, but you're not really bleeding from it because you realize it was happening. And we used to explain it like kind of that way and stuff. It was kind of fun. Like, hey, a dagger went into your back, and you turn around and the person's like, oh my God, I didn't kill them. You're like, you mother, somebody get this dagger out my back. I can't reach it. That kind of thing. So yeah, getting your hand chopped off, but still being able to survive. And so your health levels, as you start to lose your health levels, this is how many dice you're losing from your pools, so that even mentally you would start losing these from your pools because you can't think straight. You're injured. You're confused. So I'm going to go all the way back to the. Well, I guess there's not really much of time. I'm going to go to the name of the book. So, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. talk about LARP, not LARPing, but what's it called? It's not just live action role playing, but it's the here in Columbus, a place called Daga here, but he played in a park. Drew says, I liked Requiem and the other Chronicles of Darkness. They dropped much of the horrible meta plot and focused on actually making horror games. Now, that part of it I agree with. I think the meta plot was, to me, was a little too convoluted. My group never really played into that because the meta plot, for those who don't know, not that other role-playing games didn't do this, but as one of the largest producers of a tabletop role-playing game, White Wolf had a meta plot, which meant that as you purchased the book and you read into the lore of the books were going through time revealing secrets about the coming, what was called Gehenna. It was when the ancient vampires would rise up and would feed on the vampires of that time. And they actually literally ended their own game line and then brought it back with the first book, Vampires of Requiem. But yeah. You're so bad, TA. Yeah. Yeah, I for me, the meta plot wasn't very important to me, and which is why, like, I never got into the whole emo goth scene where people like were just like took it so serious you can't change things, and did you know that the Ravnos vampire is going to turn into a whirlwind of blood and blah blah. I was just like, man, the A's need a tighter top end to indicate it. Yeah. They actually cleared this up a little bit, cleaned this up in the 20th anniversary by making, because this, there's like this purplish, I guess they were trying to make this as if it was carved into black marble, and they cleaned it up and made it like black and white so you could actually see it a little bit better. Yeah, Nameless Spooks. I don't know anyone who really used the meta plot either. A little too hard to keep up with, right? Because you had to know what was ahead, and then it was, you had your gatekeepers that were like, "What? You didn't know about the Thru and the Toreador getting together and being slain by the other one? What do you mean you didn't know that?" And it's like, yeah, dude, I didn't buy all the books. Yeah, I know a lot of people read the plot like a novel but never used it. And there were a lot of people that were, I guess you could say, gamist novelists, I suppose you could call them, more interested in the meta plot than actual playing the game. And that was another thing that really spiked their sales, right? Like people who wanted to know what was true, because there was a lot of contradictory information out there for the background of the game. The name Gehenna being used for Ragnarok type scenario, did anyone bother anyone? I don't know. At the time, I don't think it did. I think today it probably, because it has a lot of allusions to fiendish origins and whatnot, as well as other things. Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah, is it being an angsty 16-year-old who cuts themselves an essential prerequisite for playing vampire? It felt like that was the thing, right? You had to have like, I need an ankle length oiled cloth black coat with the shoulder defenders and the black fingernails and the solid black, over the calf laced up boots and whatnot. Yeah, long over black dyed hair and whatnot. That was a big thing. That was huge. They ornate glass bottles for things like liquor. You know what? I used to do that for potions. For go. Well, I lived near there was a bar at the corner when I lived in Philly, and they would toss the stuff out in the trash, and you could get them and wash them out and then use them. And they had different colors like green and brown and blue and whatnot. Yeah. Yep. Kind of cool. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll do, since I was going to go to Degenesis, but Degenesis isn't really historical and not really cultural. But maybe, you know what? We'll stay fantasy, because I'm saying it's not D&D. We'll stick with The Hidden Isle, which is a game that uses nothing but tarot as its adjudication. And it's pretty cool. It's based on, it's a Forged in a Dark game, so it doesn't use dice, it uses tarot cards. And it's kind of a cool game. I'm surprised. Well, there are lots of games that, for me, are like, oh, everyone's talking about it. And then once the FOMO goes away, no one talks about it. It's crazy how that is. Oh, props for games. We used to love them. For a short time, we used to make food that was really related to the game. Drew says Gehenna is a biblical term that refers to the place of the dead condemned at the day of judgment. So that was fine for the apocalypse. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm not offended because it's coming soon because you're playing role-playing games. Yeah, that's awesome. So anyway, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for tuning in, by the way. Uh, I'm surprised that since I never promote the channel, that there's even double-digit people who are even tuning in. That's kind of cool. Thank you very much. So to give you an update in the future, and hopefully I will be able to get some of these done. Tarot. Yep. Yeah. Crown Royal. Hey, how many people used Crown Royal bags for their dice, right? Yeah. You're so silly, TA. Yep. On that note, happy hump day. Everybody have a great one. Thank you very much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. And also, we will see thee tomorrow. We're going to stick around the Mediterranean. We'll do the Hidden Isle. We will do Wagadu. And what's some other ones? Mummy the Resurrection. Oh, I think there's you guys are so silly. Anyway, have a great one. I'll see you later. Peace and tranquility. Bye.